Yay.
Hello, everyone. This is Katie Phillips from Tosa Together. Sorry for our delay tonight. Happy New Year and welcome back to Tosa Talks, Building a Diverse, Thriving Community, an online Facebook Live series proudly sponsored by our generous friends at Bostic. Tosa Talks features 3 monthly presentations, designed to provide meaningful discussions around racial and social justice issues to support the work of building an inclusive, anti-racist community. We are excited for tonight's discussion with members of Legal Action of Wisconsin. This discussion is part of the Equity and Inclusion Issues track that streams live at 7 p.m. on the third Wednesday of each month. Please also join us for the Personal Stories track on the second Tuesday and the Government, Department, and Organization track on the last Thursday of each month. Presentations are recorded and available for viewing and sharing on this Facebook page or on the Tosa Together YouTube channel. We welcome and encourage you to take part in the live Q&A session tonight. Please add your questions for our speakers into the Facebook comment section during the presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's host, Rebecca Salauda.
Hi, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm very excited tonight to be joined by a couple members of Legal Action of Wisconsin. Legal Action of Wisconsin mandate is to help provide equal access to justice for Wisconsin's most vulnerable residents. Legal Action of Wisconsin is a nonprofit law firm that provides civil legal aid to low-income individuals in 39 southern Wisconsin counties through its Farm Worker Justice Project. Legal Action also represents individuals statewide. Since 1968, Legal Action has provided representation to about 450,000 individuals. Tonight, we are joined by 2 of its stellar attorneys who are working a lot with unemployment and in helping people get back to work. First is Julie Leary, is a staff attorney with the Road to Opportunity Project at Legal Action of Wisconsin in the Milwaukee office. Julie graduated from Marquette University School of Law cum laude in May of 2020 and joined Legal Action in August of 2020. Julie's work is focused on removing barriers to employment, including, but not limited to, municipal citation defense, criminal record expungement, and pardon application assistance. We are also joined by JJ Moore, who is also a staff attorney with the Volunteer Lawyers Project at Legal Action in the Milwaukee office. JJ graduated from Marquette Law School in May of 2018 and joined Legal Action in March of 2020. JJ's work is currently split between finding representation for domestic abuse survivors in an array of areas and running the Milwaukee Unemployment Clinic. So thank you, Julie and JJ, for joining us. And I guess I'd like to sort of put a perspective on what you all have been seeing since joining this, this year. And if you could compare, if you know, what the statistics were for what the unemployment clinic was dealing with in 2019 to today. Julie, do you have that information?
Yeah, so Legal Action of Wisconsin, while we do take unemployment cases, it didn't used to make up so much of the work that our attorneys do. So in 2019, we had 89 unemployment cases, and that ranges from simple brief advice cases to full representation. In 2020, we had 1,011 unemployment cases, also ranging from brief advice to full representation.
So how many attorneys do you have in your office then who are addressing unemployment matters?
I don't have a great number for that because we don't have any attorneys who were strictly doing unemployment, right? So we don't have any staff attorneys that was their entire caseload. It's sort of become an all hands on deck situation. So any attorney that could take on unemployment cases sort of had to, if their grant allowed for it, or if it fit within the larger scheme of the project that they do. So because I do work in the employment area, I've taken on a lot of unemployment cases.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, and I have to give a shout out. One thing I didn't mention, I meant to, is that while we're going to provide general information, I'm predicting on unemployment matters, we are not going to be providing any specific legal advice, and we will provide contact information in the chat about contacting legal action. Actually, why don't we share that now? If people needed assistance with unemployment, how would they contact legal action?
So you can go to our website and it will direct you on what numbers you can call. Generally speaking, for unemployment cases, because we got so swamped with them, they are going all through our intake unit. So they're sort of answering the calls, taking basic information from people about the kind of unemployment case that they're having, and trying to feel out from the beginning whether or not we think it's something that could get handled in the unemployment clinic, which I believe you volunteer for pretty often, or if it's a case that we need to reroute to somebody for full representation from the beginning.
Okay. And just for our audience, I introduced JJ. I just got noticed his computer is crashed. So Julie and you will have a nice conversation, and then we will, when JJ can come back in, hopefully we will be able to hear from him because he does run that unemployment clinic. And what is that website offhand? Do you have the?
I actually never go to it.
Something you probably go to.
It's legalaction.org. So it's pretty easy.
Legalaction.org. Okay. And we'll make sure to put that in the chat for anybody to look at. So that's been a dramatic increase. So what are sort of the other thing that we've that's been in the news, and I know that has been a discussion point in is not just the quantity of cases, but the backlog that we've seen. Early on, from an article that I pulled out from earlier this year, I keep saying this year, I mean last year, 2020, that at one point there were 700,000 cases backlogged. And normally, in my experience at least, people would have a decision on their unemployment within 3 weeks, usually less. And then if it didn't work out, they'd go to a hearing. So everything would probably be wrapped up within, you know, a month, a little bit more than that. And now we're seeing much more significant backlogs. And so what are you seeing, since you get a bigger picture of it than I do?
What we have seen is the backlog get progressively worse as time has gone on. Just things keep getting pushed out further and further. So just to give you some context, a few of my clients right now initially applied for unemployment or PUA in March of 2020, got denied by August or September, appealed that denial, and I just now got hearing packets for them. So that means that the appeal hearing hasn't yet been sent.
Yeah. And I would echo that in my experience. I do intake work, getting sort of more information, and did a session this morning, talked to somebody who had applied for unemployment, regular unemployment was denied, then applied for PUA and has been denied, and he's been off of work since March. So, but maybe just take a step back, because we're probably talking about things that people don't know what we're talking about. Can you explain the difference between regular unemployment and PUA?
Yes, so there's actually even more programs than that right now, as you know.
Yeah,
but,
get to some of those new ones I don't even know anything about.
So there is what we call regular unemployment or state unemployment. That is the standard unemployment program that people in the state of Wisconsin apply to if they are terminated from their job, if they otherwise fit the criteria for regular state unemployment. You apply for that through the Department of Workforce Development that Wisconsin has, or DWD for short. PUA, which DWD unfortunately calls PUA, and it drives me absolutely crazy, is Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. So this is a program that was created by the CARES Act, I believe, that
Yes.
Congress passed last year. And that is supposed to cover people who wouldn't traditionally fall within the bounds of state unemployment. So this is more commonly used by people, let's say, who weren't employed by a company per se, but were individual independent contractors. So people who have commonly used PUA have been people who work in the wedding industry, gig economy workers, that kind of thing, where you're working based on events. There's 11 qualifying criteria for PUA that's spelled out in the CARES Act. Other ways that people can qualify are parents who have had to stay home with their kids because they've gone to online learning, so they can't have a regular full-time job. People like that might qualify for PUA as well.
Yeah. Another area that I've seen a lot of qualification for PUA is to qualify for unemployment, you need to have worked for a certain number of weeks, have a certain amount of earning. And I had seen a couple of people early on who had only just started a job and never really got to work it, were laid off because of the pandemic. And so then they had qualified, or theoretically, we'll see, whenever they get that hearing, but they should qualify for PUA. And welcome back, JJ. So glad you can make it back. So we were just talking about trying to define all of the different sort of programs and areas that people can apply for that also lead to a certain amount of confusion. So Julie defined regular unemployment. Then there's PUA. We will not call PUA, just for you. And maybe you can address this. I have heard a lot of people very confused about these two, and what sort of problems does that lead to for people trying to apply for unemployment?
Well, I think the most confusing part is even in the regular unemployment, they ask questions related to COVID. They go, has your work been affected by COVID? Do you believe that you are not able to work due to COVID during the regular unemployment weekly claims? So people are checking it as they file their weekly claims, thinking they're filing for the PUA, but then they finally get a determination letter saying, oh, sorry, you had childcare, you're denied regular unemployment. And people call in and saying, I was denied PUA, and I was told that I marked it every weekly claim that I did. I don't know why I was denied for this. Then we receive the determination letter and we go, no, you've been applying for regular unemployment all this time. They should have been able to get a quick determination letter in and said, no, sorry, this isn't what you should be doing. Apply for PUA. And they have language at the bottom of their determination letters that could be much clearer of exactly what they need to do for the next step. A majority of the time when I do intakes and I'm cycling through and realizing that people should have been applying for PUA all the time, I send them the direct link of where this is what you need to apply for now. Don't worry about what you were just doing. It's frustrating, but continue to go through. But I think that's the biggest confusion is people thought they were applying. They thought it was all one application, not I need to apply for regular unemployment, get denied, then apply for PUA and go through that whole separate process.
And now Julie was talking about the huge lags, the huge delays that people are having. So I've seen, and I would imagine you all have, is this confusion is not a minor inconvenience for folks. It's leading to months of being without benefits that they're entitled to under the law, or is that what you've been saying?
Yes, it's been someone, I just had a client come in that had applied in March, had been filing weekly claims all the way through March, just received a denial letter with a to appeal it by 127 and thought they had been doing PUA this entire time and they had not. So now they have to apply for PUA, wait for that determination. Hopefully that goes through, and still hasn't received a payment since March.
Yeah.
Like it's
Well, and
frustrating.
God forbid for our clients who have a determination, like JJ said, and miss the appeal deadline. Our late appeal clients are really in a world of hurt. If they miss that late appeal deadline, we're now looking at making a case for a late appeal, having to do a good cause hearing for a late appeal. And we are getting these good cause hearings contested, which means people are getting denied unemployment altogether because they missed a deadline to appeal a decision that may or may not have been correct in the first place.
And I've done some of those good cause hearings. The most recent one I did, I mean, just to understand that these aren't people who are just not paying attention or not caring. My client had a severe learning disability, was not able to read the documents that she was receiving. And fortunately, we were able to convince them that she had this severe learning disability, but it did put things, even that much back. So going back to the mission of legal action, where you are assisting some of the most vulnerable people that we have, this includes, not only individuals with learning disabilities, but you receive these things in the mail, and how do you see that impacting some of the clients that these notices about a hearing come strictly through the mail? Have you seen it have any impact?
I think it's significant where they're receiving the notices in the mail, but I think the communication from DWD, from the adjudicators, is one of the bigger issues that I'm seeing, where people are saying they stated that they called me. I have my phone on me 24/7. I never received this phone call. At the beginning, at least they were leaving a voicemail. It sounded like it was a spam call, but at least it was a voicemail going like, "You have DWD, please provide us information by so-and-so date." Wasn't great, but I'm getting a majority of people now that are saying, "I never received a phone call." They get denied, and then trying to resolve that, like send in missing information. There's no clear way to do that. It's the luck of the draw who you call in and who you speak to. And now you're waiting to go in front of the ALJ to be like, "We faxed over this missing information." 4 months later, ALJ takes a look at it and goes, "Oh yeah, this is exactly what you needed. Why are you here?"
Right.
So I don't think the mail is as bad as just how do you solve it over the phone? Like there needs to be a clearer path to doing it. There needs to be a problem solving aspect to it, to be like, these issues can be resolved without waiting 4 to 5 months for a hearing now, let alone anything else. But that's the frustrating thing that I'm seeing from clients. And it's frustrating even when I call in and I'm trying to direct something or try to resolve something ahead of time, and they're just telling me, "Well, just wait."
Yeah, we've seen significant access issues across the board. I think we've had, I can think of a handful of clients that I've heard about that there were issues with mailing, because sometimes we have clients that are homeless, right? So
Right.
them getting the mail is going to be an issue. But I think there are larger issues with, we have clients who don't, are not going to have a working computer at home, but the system relies on you filing these weekly claims online. So you're forcing people, if they've got access to online services. It's probably through their cell phone. They're doing all that work through their cell phone. Like JJ said, there's been a lot of issues with adjudicator phone calls. There isn't a mechanism to easily resolve those issues. And there could easily, I think, be a mechanism through their online portal. If they're going to force everybody to go online, why can't we resolve these issues there?
Yeah. Yeah, thought I had printed it off. There was, and I know I experienced this very early on, but I thought I found the actual statistic. It was something like at the beginning, only 1 in 1,000 calls were actually answered by a person. And I was talking to people who would get on, it was like lining up for concert tickets. You'd get on the very minute they would open and they would just be hitting redial, redial, redial. Take like 3-4 hours to get to a person. And then with they did this massive hiring of new adjudicators, and they would get to people who'd be like, wouldn't be able to answer their questions, were not terribly helpful. So that was incredibly frustrating. Other things like you mentioned, because I guess when I was thinking of mailing, I was thinking of, again, somebody I talked to today who had been evicted because he lost he didn't get his unemployment. He'd been waiting for that long. So when you're evicted and you don't have an address, what do you do? Or early on in the pandemic when, oh, I like your cat. Early on in the pandemic, especially when libraries weren't open and you said, people who don't have access to technology, that was their access to technology. And so sometimes the thoughts that we have that, oh, everybody has a computer or everybody has a cell phone or has a smartphone or has an address is, really just not true, especially for some of the people who are most in need of these benefits.
We've also seen a lot of language access issues, clients who do not speak or read English well enough to address the information that they're getting online or through the mail, or to answer adjudicators' questions when they do call.
Yeah. And also JJ made a great point. There have been numerous people who've come and said, yeah, I got this thing saying I was denied because I didn't respond to their call. I've never gotten a call. Do you know what information? I had one time a guy even gave me access to his online portal, and for the life of us, we had no idea what information they were looking for. We couldn't tell. So again, that just added to that very significant delay at a time when people really need these benefits.
I think the mail access issue, I think with the CDC moratorium, I think that has curbed a lot. I think that issue could have been a lot worse because
Yes.
I think the evictions could have been a lot worse than what they are currently at. Not that they're great, but at least it's being pushed. I'm sure if the CDC moratorium is not extended, we may see some of those mailing with people been waiting since March, April, or to get their benefits or to get a decision or a hearing, that if they're not logging in to see their portal, or they had to cut off their internet access or something along those lines, or their phone access, I think that could run much worse than what we have. I think the mailing hasn't been as bad. I could see it getting worse if something significantly changes and the floodgates open with evictions.
Yeah. And just again, a shout out to the work of Legal Action. You also have an eviction defense project that has provided amazing help for people. I talked to somebody earlier today who works in that, and the numbers were staggering to me. So they've put them off now as these moratoriums go, but that they have scheduled like 100 evictions a day for hearing, which is, when those floodgates open, it's going to be pretty traumatic.
Which underscores the issues of the unemployment, right? We have this sort of pending disaster with evictions in theory, and the backlog of unemployment only exacerbates that issue because people aren't able to pay rent, they aren't able to pay their mortgage. I can't get rid of this. I'm so sorry about the cat.
That's so sweet.
So these things feed into each other. You know, when the system breaks down in different places, but it breaks down as a whole. And so our clients are those who are most in need of guidance through that system.
So another thing, if you're able to address it, is one thing that really struck me is the December unemployment figures came out. And I don't know if you caught this, but there were 156,000 people lost their job in December. But it was, I'm sorry, 140,000 job loss is what they said. The problem was 156,000 of them were women. Men gained jobs. And then if you looked a little deeper, white women gained jobs as well. So it was even a larger number, and I haven't been able to find that. But all of the job loss in December was borne by women of color. And so I know that I don't know if that's something that you all have studied, but that is, with all of the craziness of everything else that happened in December, I think that's a tragedy that did not catch more headlines, because that is really a very stark and disturbing figure to me.
I had not heard those numbers. Even with me working with unemployment on such a regular basis, that didn't even cross my radar, but that doesn't surprise me. I would say for the Milwaukee clinic, a majority are female women seeking unemployment or dealing with childcare or dealing with those aspects where they're trying to figure out how to keep that going, or what is the trigger figure. Even early on, we had the pregnancy issues where DWD was setting a 6-week bar from when you gave birth. You were disqualified for 6 weeks following that with no, I have yet to
I
see
hadn't
a
heard
reason for it, but that just seems to be the standard, unless you had a doctor's note that specifically said you can return 1 week, 2 weeks after birth. If you were just going to plan to be out, they set 6 weeks as the mark to do it. I think that blew me away when all of a sudden that small wave came my way, and I was trying to figure out exactly what was going on. I know Julie was working with one client, and a few of our other staff that does the unemployment took a few of those cases, because that's mind-blowing that was coming through. But just the numbers specifically in December, I haven't seen that wave come completely my way, but I'm sure when January comes and they've gotten their appeals in February, because I'm usually a month behind. So whatever's happening in December, I usually will catch at the end of the following month or into the second month, as people try to process what they were doing, or they get their appeals in and now they're trying to figure out, how do I get my hearing moving forward on that? But I'll let Julie speak any further on it.
Yeah, we did see a wave of those all at once. While DWD obviously hasn't told us anything about those cases, it was definitely our impression that there was some sort of blanket decision, being a blanket policy or something, where all of these pregnant women were just being denied as unable and unavailable to work for 6 weeks after giving birth. There is no reason why that should be true as a general matter. I'm sure that it is different for every woman that gives birth, whether or not she would be able and available to work. I have 2 of those cases right now that ended up being late appeals, so they're still trying to get through.
Wow, I hadn't heard about that one. That's pretty appalling to me, because I have worked with women in other contexts who have gone back to work within a week or two because they had to provide for their family. They don't have, you know, certainly there are some women who have medical reasons that they have to be off longer, and not discounting or diminishing that. But there are many women who, you know, are just not able to afford to take off that kind of medical leave, and so never plan on it. So that seems rather arrogant and sexist on my humble opinion. Yeah, and I want to get back to so an issue that I look at otherwise is the whole problem and explosion of gig workers. And so, you know, I think that so the fact that PUA has recognized that there's gig workers who need to have these benefits, but considering normally they wouldn't if they lost these independent contractor jobs, of which it's growing tremendously in our economy. Starting off, when we said there were different programs, we mentioned regular unemployment and then PUA, and then you referenced there's a whole host of ones coming through. I don't know if that's with the new version of the CARES Act or what, but maybe you could talk about what other programs are out there.
Right. So what I was referring to wasn't necessarily other ways that you could qualify, but there are enhanced unemployment benefits that have come through various laws that have been passed. So the CARES Act originally had I think it's an extra $300.
Extra $600.
Extra 600. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That if you qualified for state unemployment, then you could qualify for this extra $600. And I can never remember if you qualified for PUA. Would you also qualify for the extra?
Yes, you did.
You would. You
Okay.
would.
Yeah, it was so important. And I can just speak, and I don't mean to interrupt you. I just know that you started with legal action in the fall. So after that came to an end. But it made the world of difference to so many people that they had that income, that I think it was just incredibly important. So, but that came to an end, I believe, JJ, was at the end of July?
Yeah, so the 600 ran through July 30, the week of July 31st, and then it switched over from 300 from August 1st to December 26th. And then we had about a 3-week gap from when the new CARES Act extension hit. So there was a 3-week gap where there were no extra benefits being paid. And now the 300 is picked back up by Wisconsin, moving forward, I think till April.
Oh, is that an extension then?
Yeah, they extended it for, I believe to the first week of April, if I'm recalling correctly, for that. But that 300's picking back up. They're not doing the extra 600 like they were at the beginning, but they re-picked up the 300 after a 3-week gap. I think the issue that we're running into now is people exhausting their benefits. So they've run, the people who are lucky to get regular unemployment or lucky to get PUA without much of an issue are running their full weeks. And now if some of them knew to apply for extended benefits, some of them, DWD didn't make clear to them that they had to apply for extended benefits. So they didn't, and now we're trying to do late appeals for the extended benefits, which opens up all new cans of worms with that. But I've had a few come in now that have gone through their extended benefits because they started unemployment before the pandemic hit, and it's run straight through. They got the extra few weeks to carry them through, and now they're out of that, and DWD is telling them to apply for PUA. They apply for PUA, and they're getting denied for PUA because it's not one of the 11 reasons.
Right.
So I'm not sure for the people who have completely exhausted and don't have a job what the plan is for that one. Those ones have just started to come in, and we're still working through exactly how to help and see if because there's supposed to be a catch-all in the PUA that's like other reasons as determined. And I don't know if you've exhausted everything, if it's going to fall under other reasons as determined. I think it's going to have to be argued in front of NALJ, and they're going to have to decide if that counts or not for that. But I think the extended benefits is the next wave of confusing. Do I apply for it? How do I apply for it? There is a separate whole application that you have to apply for. So those are things I've reminded my clients when I know that they've gotten towards the end, I'm like, when you receive this back pay, remember, apply for this at this week, just so you're back in the queue and you don't skip a beat. But I think that's the difficulty on that.
So we have the extra 600 that people had originally, then there's and I forget the acronym, but so you normally get, it's 26 weeks of unemployment. So this was the extension you're talking about, I think was an additional 13 weeks of unemployment. And so with the new, I don't know what they called it, the new CARES Act that is going through, what do you know about of those additional benefits that are supposedly coming through?
Then
The
I've
new
only
one-
made it about a third of the way through the new
Okay.
CARES Act as I read through it.
So that hasn't really hit as far as information from DWD.
Yeah, that
DWD,
information
I should
has
clarify, Department of Workforce Development, who runs the unemployment division.
correct. That hasn't truly trickled down, or they haven't really even done an FAQ that's really explained like this is what it's going to look like moving forward, other than setting a couple clarifications for backdating PUA for after December 27th, because the initial reading scared a lot of people because it limited to go back to December 1st. Now it seems that you can go back to whenever you first applied for regular unemployment if you should have been receiving PUA. So that's not as bad. And then they've done a clarification on the gap of when the benefit of the extra 300 was being paid, because people weren't receiving any checks for those period of time. But do you have any updates, Julie? Have you made it any further than I have through it?
No, not really. I wish they would stop changing the acronym for it, though. It
I
really
know.
confuses me. I do know that in the latest iteration of what I think the Biden administration is proposing, they're saying they want to do a $400 additional amount as
Okay.
opposed to the $300, but that would have to pass Congress first.
Okay. So I realized I was having such a good time chatting with you that I haven't been paying attention to the questions in the chat. So I want to make sure we hit those. And I know we said we'd stop at 8, but since we got done a little bit later, you all good with maybe staying over an extra 10 minutes? Because I want to hit these questions.
Of course.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
definitely.
much. So the question was asked, what is PUA? And I think we discussed that. That's then what are the most common reasons that unemployment is denied? Maybe you can each take your least favorite reason for unemployment being denied. I think one of them we've already heard is failure to answer a call that was never made, to provide information that you didn't know was owed. But what are other sorts of reasons that you're seeing?
Generally speaking, if you are fired, you would be eligible for state unemployment, COVID or no COVID times, right? But a lot of cases we get are people who were fired for some cause, and there's an issue of whether or not it rises to the level of misconduct. So like if you were fired and you were fired for cause and whatever you did rises to the level of substantial misconduct, then you are ineligible for unemployment. So we get a decent number of those, and those are difficult.
Yeah, and going off that one, like the ones that are being categorized as for causes, one of my clients, his best friend was cut during COVID and he couldn't make it to work and they fired him for cause because his bus route was travel, and trying to prove and trying to get documentation for that has not been easy, but it's definitely, I think able and available is one that I see a whole lot. And then the child care.
I'm sorry, explain what able and available.
So able and available, were you able to work and available to work? If a job was offered to you, could you work it if your employer was going to give you that? Like if you were a typist and you broke both of your hands, the likelihood is you're not able and available to do what you were hired to do. So you're not going to qualify for those weeks. But if you sprained your ankle and you're a typist, that you are able and available. You may just have not been able to come in for a day or two on that, but you were able and available to that. I think those ones, especially with the COVID aspect to it, if especially when you get in from the March and April, I think those have been a lot of hard fought cases, and the ALJs I don't think have a lot. Some have sympathy, some don't. I think it becomes a much fact intensive. How can you prove that you were ready to go? Because some people just mark the question wrong. Like they were like, oh, I'm not employed. No. And you're like, but you could have worked. If you had clicked yes, we could have moved through this whole thing. I think that is one of the largest ones I've seen. And I also, for PUA, is selecting, was your job affected by COVID? I think a lot of people were trying to be diplomatic in what they were trying to respond, or they were trying to answer what they thought, and they selected other, and they were trying to write out the specific thing that was happening to them instead of just clicking, my job hours were affected by COVID, let's just click this button. And if you didn't select one of the main reasons and you tried to select other, you're going to an ALJ, and the ALJ is going to decide, do you fall under that criteria? So I think those are the ones that I've seen a lot come through, try to explain to them, this is why you were denied, and move. This is how you explain how you are ready for benefits.
One of the areas that I saw that was the hardest, I think, just personally, was people who were being called back to work in person, but due to their own circumstances, really did not feel safe being in that in-person environment. Thinking particularly of a woman who I spoke with who had a child with very, very severe asthma. She could not bring COVID into that house. She was terrified. And her employer was requiring her to come back in person, even though she had been working all along from home. So that was identified as a quit. And a quit, you normally don't get unemployment unless you can show good cause attributed to the employer. So that was, I've seen a few of those of people very scared about going back to work, some for very good reason, not trusting that their employer is going to be careful. Some employers have, some have not. So I've seen that. Going through questions. So can you discuss, or do you know why DWD is so far behind, and what is the state doing to improve the system?
I think DWD is so far behind because I don't think they were ever set up to take the sheer volume of claims that have been made within the last year. And some of that is probably the department's fault. Some of that isn't, right? Like they didn't know there's going to be a pandemic. They were going to get hit in this way. I know that DWD has made a concerted effort to hire more adjudicators, to hire more ALJs. Representatives from Legal Action have been present for some meetings now with DWD to try to, you know, express some of the issues that we're having, and they're trying to resolve some things. I think they're trying to make some changes to their infrastructure to be able to better address like some of the issues that JJ's raised about, well, I just didn't get in touch with the adjudicator. Is there a way I can get this information to them so that we don't even have to go through the whole appeals process? But changes that they're making seem to be happening slowly. I don't know.
Yeah, they weren't prepared. I don't think any of us were fully prepared of what this was going to look like, but I also don't think they reacted fast enough. I think they were hoping that it was going to subside and that they could get back to the normal that we were all used to and they were able to function in. And I think the buildup got so large, and then they are now hired the adjudicators, hired the ALJs, hired new phone staff, but that takes time to train everyone. That takes time to get prepared for everyone. And I think that's why that catch up and to get ready, I think that's why the times are getting extended. It used to be 6 to 8 weeks. Now we're looking at 12 to 16 weeks. It's just pushing. I'm sure eventually maybe we'll get back into that quick turnaround as people get comfortable and able to handle those aspects of it. But we haven't hit that point yet, and the buildup's still there.
And I'll share, I've been an attorney since 1996, so I've been around for a while doing employment. And despite all of that, I honestly still find unemployment law some of the most confusing that I deal with, more confusing than some of the federal court litigation. And I think the way one colleague described it is because they write these laws also, you know, somebody gets inspired, oh, I'm going to change unemployment and do this. And it's never been sort of this comprehensive look at unemployment and how are we going to comprehensively address these issues. And so it's so piecemeal that it leads to this confusion. So I think of these many people that they've hired to be adjudicators, trying to learn this area that quickly and all of these nuanced things is very challenging. So you get people calling, the people who are calling for questions are not the ones with the easy that you can easily answer. Those are getting solved. So I think that's also been just a structural problem with the law that we have. Somebody else is asking, how is legal action funded? And so why don't we start with that? How is legal action funded? How do you get paid?
So we have different projects that are funded through grants that legal action staff apply for. But I think probably the majority of us at Legal Action in our work is funded through donations made to an overarching organization that feeds into Legal Action of Wisconsin, Judicare Wisconsin. I think there's one other group.
I think those are the two main ones. I think there might be one. I can't think of it though.
There's also, you're also federally funded.
Yes. We're a legal services corporation, so we are federally funded. But Legal Action has made a concerted effort to have as much independent funding as possible, so that everyone's tax dollars are the only thing that we use to get paid.
Right. Yes, and I understand and appreciate that. And also because as with grant funding, there's also limitations on what you can do with the federal funding. And so some of these grants can allow you to do extra. As I understand, the eviction project came through a new grant about a year ago or 2 years ago. I don't remember what it was, if I recall correctly, but I don't know. So then the next question that follows is, how can folks who are employed help out with this unemployment situation?
Well, if you're an attorney, JJ's always looking for more attorneys to do pro bono work for our unemployment cases.
If you're an attorney, please contact me. I will happily get you shadowing and get you as immersed as I can into unemployment and any other opportunity that you might be interested in, whether it's the Eviction Defense Project or it's any of our other aspects for our volunteer lawyers. Um, I think like we spoke to the same, if you are employed or you are assisting or have the ability to maybe assist someone who might be waiting on their unemployment and try to give them support in their housing or in some sort of aspect like that. I think that's an important thing to think about. While it might be tight at the moment, it's not backbreaking. And think of your neighbors or someone, if they're complaining about not receiving unemployment or they're complaining about something along those lines, don't make it, don't I think it's a sense of caring for and listening and being empathetic to how they would like assistance. Not everyone wants a handout, not everyone wants to have someone solve the problem right away, but sometimes it's just a vent. And I think that's an important aspect for it. I don't think there's any sweeping thing that will force unemployment. If you wanted to contact the governor or contact your local representative, I think that can be an important thing of pushing it through. I've had some clients have success in contacting those and getting that extra push to figure out can we improve the aspect of unemployment. If that's something that you're willing to do, even if you're not fully affected by it, I think that can be a good understanding of, I know my friends, I know part of my family is going through this. What are you doing to help out as much as that you can?
And to the
Sure.
extent you're financially able to, supporting community organizations that are doing work like eviction defense, unemployment representation, and even especially community groups that are doing work in providing food and other aid to people who are really struggling financially right now.
All great recommendations. Supporting community need. And I like your mention about, reach out, if you're reaching out to somebody, if somebody's asking them how you can help rather than assuming, and knowing that people are hurting, that sometimes they really just need to be heard. Legal Action, I'm assuming you take donations, so always feel free there. I've been doing work with Legal Action, does amazing work, and really very, very important work. So another question. So what is the overall, I don't know if you'll know this, it's not something I know as much about. What is the overall impact on the unemployment fund? By now they will have been depleted. Will employers have to start paying in more, or is the fund replenished through the CARES Act?
I don't know anything about the unemployment. I understand the nuts and bolts that employers pay into the unemployment fund and that's how unemployment gets funded, but I really don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, JJ, do you know much?
No, I will defer to you on that. I don't have much to add to what Julie said.
Yeah, I will admit, I don't know that much. It's unemployment insurance, so it's like an insurance program. And so just as other natural disasters, insurance programs get impacted. But there is federal backing, federal support for that. Like the extra money is all being paid for by the extra weeks, the extra $600. Those are all being paid for by the federal government. the Wisconsin State Unemployment Fund is only responsible for that initial base 26 weeks that they would be responsible for anyway. So we have hit our hour. I appreciate that very much. Love this conversation. I would love to another time. I would love, Julie, to talk to you more about your other work and the impact of removing barriers to unemployment, municipal citations, criminal records, expungement, all of that kind of thing. Because I see that as also just one more barrier that we're seeing. Again, to get back to what we were talking about earlier with the disparate impact on communities of color, when we have Milwaukee being one of the highest percentages of incarcerated Black men, that that having that issue then on top of it of, we aren't going to hire you if you have an arrest or conviction record is very challenging. So, so thank you for working on that. Thank you to Legal Action for working on that, and unemployment, both of you, for taking this on early in your career. I know that is so important. So any last words? Otherwise we will sign off.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your night with us. All right. And with that, good night.